Holy shit. He said what?
August 4th, 40 years ago, Meghan was born, and she was born as a C-section, so she was put in my arm. I was the first person to hold her. Her little hand went around my fingers like that, and I fell in love with her, and I had been that way for 40 years.
Stop everything, because royal watchers are calling this one of the most unsettling twists yet in the never-ending saga surrounding Meghan Markle's family drama. Just when the palace thought the noise had quieted, Meghan's father has resurfaced in a way no one was prepared for, releasing a series of private, strange, and deeply uncomfortable videos that have left viewers confused, concerned, and asking one chilling question. Why now? These aren't polished interviews. These aren't sympathetic sit-downs. According to those who have seen the clips circulating in private groups and select online spaces, the videos feel raw, disjointed, and oddly intimate, filled with rambling monologues, emotional swings, and comments that seem to blur the line between personal grievance and something far more troubling. Royal commentators say the tone alone is enough to make your stomach drop, and once the internet caught wind of their existence, chaos followed immediately. Social media erupted with speculation. Some viewers expressed concern for his well-being. Others accused him of trying, once again, to force himself into Meghan's narrative at the most damaging moment possible. Old wounds were reopened, old interviews were re-examined, and suddenly, a man the palace has long treated as a background complication became the center of a fresh storm. What makes this moment explosive isn't just the content of the videos, it's the timing. With Meghan carefully maintaining silence and distance, these clips feel like a deliberate breach of a boundary that's been in place for years. Insiders say palace aides are watching closely, not because they plan to respond, but because every time her father speaks publicly, the fallout lands squarely on Meghan. And now the question echoing through royal circles is unavoidable. Are these videos a cry for attention, a plea for reconciliation, or something far more disturbing? Because whatever the answer is, one thing is clear. This wasn't accidental, it wasn't subtle, and it's already threatening to reignite a fire the monarchy desperately wants extinguished. The moment the videos surfaced, royal watchers felt the air change. Not because Meghan Markle's father said anything new, but because of how he said it. According to people who have viewed the clips circulating quietly before spilling into wider discussion, the videos were unsettling in their tone and structure. Long pauses, sudden emotional pivots, stories that looped back on themselves, and an intimacy that felt almost intrusive, as if the audience had wandered into a private space they were never meant to see. This wasn't a polished appeal or a media-savvy interview. It felt raw, unfiltered, and deeply uncomfortable. Insiders say that's exactly why the reaction was so intense. The videos didn't feel strategic in the traditional sense, yet their release was anything but accidental. Royal commentators immediately questioned timing. Why now? Why in this format? And why release something so personal when history has shown that every public move he makes ricochets back onto Meghan with brutal force? Those questions fueled the first wave of chaos. Viewers described the clips as meandering monologues, part grievance, part reflection, part something harder to categorize. At moments he appeared emotional, at others oddly detached. He referenced past slights, perceived betrayals, and moments of silence that he seemed unable to reconcile. But what disturbed many wasn't the content alone, it was the delivery. The sense that these weren't meant for public consumption, yet were shared anyway. Social media fractured instantly. One camp expressed concern, arguing the videos felt less like an attack and more like a man unraveling under years of isolation and resentment. Another camp saw manipulation, accusing him of once again dragging Meghan into a narrative she has spent years trying to escape. And a third camp, perhaps the most uneasy, asked whether anyone should be encouraging this kind of exposure at all. Royal insiders say the palace has learned not to engage directly with anything involving Meghan's father. Every past attempt at context or rebuttal only intensified scrutiny. So instead of statements, there was monitoring, quiet concern, advisors tracking how fast the clips were spreading and where they were landing. Because even when the palace stays silent, the damage doesn't disappear, it migrates. What made this moment especially volatile was the way the videos blurred boundaries. They weren't clearly addressed to Meghan. They weren't clearly addressed to the public. They existed in an uncomfortable middle space, forcing viewers to ask whether they were witnessing a plea, a performance, or something else entirely. That ambiguity became the accelerant. Commentators quickly pointed out a pattern. Every time Meghan maintains distance and silence, her father resurfaces with something more personal, more emotionally charged. According to royal analysts, this creates a trap. If Meghan responds, she validates the behavior. If she stays silent, she's accused of cruelty. The videos, strange as they were, reignited that impossible double bind. Old footage resurfaced almost immediately. Past interviews, staged paparazzi moments, apologies that unraveled. Each resurfacing reframed the new videos as part of a long-running cycle rather than an isolated incident. And that's when concern deepened, not just for Meghan, but for the optics of a family dynamic that has been publicly broken for years with no resolution in sight. Insiders stress that Meghan has worked meticulously to remove herself from this cycle. Boundaries drawn, silence maintained, distance enforced. The release of these videos felt like a deliberate breach of that boundary, whether intentional or not. And in royal culture, boundary breaches are treated as acts, not accidents. As clips and descriptions spread, mental health advocates weighed in cautiously, urging the public not to sensationalize behavior that could reflect distress. Others pushed back, arguing that concern shouldn't excuse repeated public pressure on someone who has asked for privacy. That tension between empathy and accountability sat at the heart of the discourse. The palace's concern, according to insiders, isn't reputational damage in the traditional sense. It's unpredictability. Strange, unstructured content doesn't follow media rules. It can't be easily countered or contextualized. And unpredictability is the one thing institutions fear most, because it invites speculation, and speculation breeds narratives no one controls. What's particularly unsettling is that the videos don't seem designed to persuade. They don't make a clear argument. They don't ask for a specific outcome. They simply exist, emotionally exposed and unresolved. And unresolved content invites projection. Viewers fill in gaps with assumptions, fears, and theories, many of which land squarely on Meghan whether she's involved or not. Friends of Meghan, speaking indirectly through royal-adjacent circles, emphasize that she has not engaged with the videos and has no intention of doing so. That choice, while consistent, doesn't insulate her from impact. Headlines still pair her name with her father's actions. The association is unavoidable, and that's precisely why the videos feel so destabilizing. By the end of the first wave, one thing was clear: this wasn't just another interview. It wasn't another complaint. It was a shift in tone that made people uncomfortable enough to pay closer attention. And discomfort, in media ecosystems, is combustible. As royal watchers warn, this is the most dangerous phase, not because of what's been said, but because of what might come next. Once someone crosses into deeply personal, unstructured public sharing, there's no clear endpoint. And until it stops, the shadow it casts will continue to fall where it always does, on Meghan. And that's why, as this story continues to unfold, the real question isn't whether the videos are strange. It's whether anyone can stop the cycle they've reignited. As the second wave hit, the conversation shifted from shock to something far more uneasy: pattern recognition. Royal watchers weren't just reacting to what Meghan's father shared, they were reacting to how familiar the situation felt. According to analysts who tracked this saga closely, the videos didn't exist in isolation. They fit into a long, emotionally charged cycle that has repeated itself every time Meghan has maintained distance and refused to engage publicly. And that repetition is what escalated concern into full-blown chaos. People who had seen extended descriptions of the clips said they felt less like statements and more like streams of consciousness. Not linear, not goal-oriented. Moments of vulnerability followed by moments of accusation, then sudden calm. The lack of structure unsettled viewers because it removed the usual media cues that allow people to categorize content as either an attack, a plea, or a confession. This sat uncomfortably in between all three, making it harder to dismiss and harder to respond to responsibly. Royal commentators quickly began asking whether the videos were meant for Meghan at all. Some suggested they felt more like an attempt to be heard by anyone willing to watch. Others argued that regardless of intent, the effect was the same. Meghan's name was once again pulled into a narrative she has repeatedly tried to step away from. Intent becomes secondary when impact is this predictable. What intensified the second wave was the reaction from fringe online communities. Clips were dissected frame by frame, facial expressions analyzed, tone debated. Some users speculated irresponsibly, others pushed back hard, warning against armchair diagnoses and exploitation. That tension between curiosity and ethics became its own battleground. And at the center of it all was a woman who wasn't speaking, but was being spoken about relentlessly. Insiders say this is where palace anxiety peaked. Not because of the content itself, but because of the unpredictable public response to it. When material feels strange, people don't know how to react, so they react loudly. Some express sympathy, some express anger, some spiral into conspiracy. None of that is controllable. And the palace's long-standing strategy, starve stories of oxygen, becomes far less effective when the story taps into concern rather than outrage. Behind the scenes, sources claim there were discussions about whether anyone should step in privately. Not to issue statements, but to encourage restraint. Historically, however, such interventions have backfired, leading to even more public airing of grievances. That history reportedly made advisors hesitant. Doing nothing felt cruel, doing something felt risky. And so, once again, silence won by default. Meanwhile, Meghan's supporters grew increasingly frustrated. They pointed out that she has set clear boundaries for years, and those boundaries continue to be tested publicly, without consequence. They questioned why the burden of compassion always seems to fall on her, while accountability for repeated boundary breaches remains elusive. For them, the videos weren't just strange, they were exhausting. Critics, however, accused Meghan of emotional coldness, arguing that silence fuels escalation. Mental health advocates pushed back, emphasizing that no one is obligated to engage with behavior that harms them, regardless of blood ties. That debate, duty versus self-protection, quickly overshadowed the videos themselves and reignited one of the most divisive questions in modern royal discourse. What made the second phase especially volatile was the way mainstream outlets handled the story. Some avoided specifics entirely, referencing unusual videos without detail. Others leaned into the strangeness, amplifying discomfort for clicks. That inconsistency created confusion, and confusion bred speculation. In the absence of clear information, the loudest interpretations dominated. Royal insiders note that this is precisely how reputational damage occurs in modern media ecosystems, not through confirmed facts, but through cumulative unease. Each article, each commentary, each vague reference adds weight. And that weight inevitably lands on Meghan, even when she has done nothing to invite it. The emotional toll of this cycle became a central talking point. Commentators began asking how many times a public figure can be pulled back into family turmoil before the boundary itself becomes meaningless. Meghan has spoken openly in the past about the cost of constant scrutiny, and these videos felt like a direct challenge to the space she fought to carve out. At the same time, a quieter conversation emerged. Concern for her father's well-being without excusing the behavior. Some observers argued that compassion and boundaries aren't mutually exclusive, that it's possible to wish someone support while refusing to engage publicly. Others rejected that framing, insisting that repeated public exposure is itself harmful and should not be normalized. As the second wave settled, one truth became unavoidable. This situation no longer fits neatly into the category of family feud. It has evolved into a recurring public spectacle driven by asymmetry, one side maintaining silence, the other escalating visibility. And asymmetrical conflicts don't resolve themselves, they either burn out or explode. The palace's continued silence began to feel less strategic and more strained. Royal watchers noted that while the monarchy has weathered countless storms, this kind of deeply personal, unstructured content creates a different kind of vulnerability. It invites moral questions rather than factual rebuttals. And moral questions linger. By the end of the second phase, fatigue set in, but not resolution. People were tired of speculating, tired of arguing, tired of watching the same dynamic repeat. Yet no mechanism existed to stop it. And that helplessness only deepened the sense of chaos. As one royal analyst put it bluntly, this isn't about what was said. It's about the fact that it keeps happening. And with that realization came a far more unsettling question. If this pattern continues, what does the next escalation look like? Because if history is any guide, this story isn't winding down. It's bracing for impact. By the time the third phase took shape, the focus quietly shifted from the videos themselves to the uncomfortable truth they exposed. This situation has no clean ending. Royal watchers began using a word that hadn't dominated earlier discussions: impasse. Not a feud, not a scandal. An impasse created by years of unresolved family conflict playing out in public, with no mechanism for repair that doesn't cause further harm. And that realization made the chaos feel heavier, not louder. Insiders say this is the point where institutions and audiences alike grow uneasy because there's no longer a clear next move. Meghan's father has spoken, again, in a way that feels deeply personal and boundary blurring. Meghan Markle, by all accounts, has chosen continued silence. The palace has opted for distance. Each position is internally consistent. Together, they create a stalemate that keeps generating fallout without offering relief. Royal analysts note that the public response matured in this phase. The outrage cooled, but the concern didn't. Instead, it settled into a kind of wary attentiveness. People stopped sharing clips and started asking harder questions about responsibility, ethics, and limits. Not what did he say, but why are we watching this? Not will Meghan respond, but why is she expected to? This shift is critical because it reframes the narrative away from spectacle and toward consequence. The strange quality of the videos, once the primary talking point, became secondary to their impact. And that impact, observers agree, is almost entirely borne by Meghan. Every resurfacing, every strange release, reattaches her name to a story she has repeatedly tried to exit. Silence hasn't freed her from association. It has merely prevented escalation on her side. Behind closed doors, insiders say the palace views this as an unsolvable problem. Any intervention risks inflaming tensions. Any acknowledgement risks legitimizing the behavior. Any condemnation risks appearing cruel. The safest path remains non-engagement. But safety for the institution does not equal relief for the individual caught in the crossfire. That imbalance is what makes this phase so unsettling. Mental health advocates have become more vocal, urging restraint from media outlets and audiences alike. They emphasize that public speculation about someone's state of mind is harmful, and that compassion must not become a pretext for continued exposure. At the same time, boundary advocates stress that empathy does not require participation, and that stepping back is often the healthiest response. These two positions, both valid, collide without resolution. What's striking is how clearly the cycle has revealed itself. Each escalation follows the same arc: resurfacing content, viral discomfort, moral debate, institutional silence, public fatigue. Then a pause. And then, inevitably, another resurfacing. Royal commentators say the predictability is what makes it so damaging. It teaches the audience to expect recurrence, which keeps the wound open indefinitely. In this third phase, some voices began calling for a collective recalibration. Less amplification, more restraint. Not because the videos are irrelevant, but because attention itself has become the accelerant. Yet restraint is difficult in an ecosystem designed to reward discomfort. And so the responsibility fractures, spread thin across platforms, outlets, and viewers, none of whom feel individually accountable. Friends of Meghan, speaking indirectly through royal-adjacent reporting, reiterate that she remains committed to boundaries and healing. There is no plan to respond, no plan to explain, no plan to correct. That decision, insiders say, is not rooted in indifference but in hard-earned self-preservation. Engaging would not fix the dynamic, it would reset it. As days pass, the story's afterimage lingers, not as trending chaos, but as a low-level hum of unease. The kind that resurfaces whenever another article mentions family tensions or private videos. The kind that reminds observers that some stories don't end, they just quiet down until the next disruption. Royal historians place this moment within a broader context of modern monarchy and media. Private lives colliding with public platforms in ways previous generations never had to manage. The institution can retreat behind tradition. Individuals cannot. And when family conflict becomes content, the line between concern and consumption blurs dangerously. The most sobering realization of this phase is that there may be no satisfying resolution, no apology that heals, no statement that settles, no intervention that closes the door without reopening another. The best outcome may simply be de-escalation, time, distance, and a collective decision to stop feeding the cycle. Whether that happens is uncertain. What is certain is that this moment has forced a reckoning, not with facts but with boundaries, with how often the public demands access to private pain, with how silence is misread as cruelty and speech as entitlement, and with how easily attention becomes a weapon, even when framed as concern. As the dust settles, one truth remains uncomfortably clear. The chaos wasn't created by the videos alone. It was created by a system, media, monarchy, and audience alike, that struggles to know when to look away. And until that changes, the story won't truly end. It will simply wait, quietly, for the next time attention is invited back in. If you've stayed through this entire story, don't click away now, because this is exactly the kind of moment where attention matters. What's unfolding here isn't just another royal headline or a strange viral clip. It's a real-time test of boundaries, ethics, and how much access the public believes it's entitled to when private pain spills into the open. This is where you come in. The way stories like this continue, or finally slow down, depends on how audiences respond. Do we amplify discomfort just because it's there, or do we start questioning why it keeps being served to us? Do we confuse concern with consumption, or do we recognize when silence is not cruelty but survival? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not hot takes, real reflections. Should moments like this be shared at all? Where is the line between empathy and exploitation? And why does the weight of these situations always seem to land on the same person, again and again? These conversations don't happen in headlines, they happen right here. Hit like if this story made you uncomfortable in a way that felt important. Subscribe now, because royal chaos doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it returns quietly, disguised as just another update. When that happens, you'll want to understand the pattern behind it, not just react to the surface. Because the most dangerous part of stories like this isn't what's strange or shocking. It's how easily we get used to watching it.